fragmented a silver music box with a melody from nowhere. A family frozen in a 5-second loop. A town where everyone's pain has been pressed into silence. 13 hours earlier, Laura Miller's index finger tapped against the edge of a lukewarm styrofoam cup. The rhythm was automatic. Tap, tap, tap. Like the metronome her mother had forced on her as a child. 3 monitors glowed in the darkness of the Oak Creek Emergency Dispatch Center, each one casting a sickly green light across her bloodshot eyes. The police grid pulsed on the main screen, an arterial map of a sleeping town. Outside, rain lashed against the reinforced windows. It was 2:14 a.m. The hum of the servers had become the background score of her life. 17 years she'd sat in this chair, headset permanently crimped into the hair above her ear, ready for the moment when someone's world would collapse. 7 nights a week, 52 weeks a year. The rhythms were all she had. The coffee was always lukewarm. The monitors were always glowing. A piercing red flash erupted across the console. Laura jerked upright. Her headset cable snagged, wrenching her neck to one side. Her palm came down hard on the accept button, hitting it with enough force that she heard the click from her own hand, even through the speakers. 911 emergency. What is your location? The line crackled. Static layered over static. Underneath it, she heard breathing. Wet, gasping, almost like drowning. She leaned closer, her forehead nearly touching the screen. In the reflection of the monitor, she could see her own face, hollow-cheeked and severe. The sound of static intensified. Then a voice. A teenager's voice. Male. Terrified. It's happening again. The hallway, it's longer. My mom is making the same sandwich for the 10th time. Help me. The caller ID blinked. 442 Willow Lane. Toby Vance. Laura's pen was already moving. She scribbled the address on a yellow legal pad, her handwriting degrading into something barely legible. Toby, stay with me. Are you safe? Can you get to a door? I don't understand, Toby whispered. Why won't it stop? Why won't anything... A chime, sharp and musical. A melody that sounded like something from a music box, tinkling and delicate and utterly wrong. Then the line went flat. The waveform on her screen flatlined into a straight white line, clean as a razor cut. Toby? Laura was shouting now. Toby, state your emergency. The call timer read 0047 seconds. She sat in the sudden silence of the dispatch center, her heart slamming against her ribs. The coffee cup had tipped over in her urgency, spreading a brown stain across the legal pad. The address was still readable. She grabbed her jacket and keys before her brain had even caught up to her body. 20 minutes later, Laura's heavy black boot splashed into a deep puddle outside 442 Willow Lane. The SUV door slammed behind her, and she gripped the maglite so hard her knuckles turned white. The rain was still coming down, a cold and relentless assault. Thunder rolled across the sky with the sound of breaking furniture. The house was dark, all the windows were dark. The front door was unlocked. She pushed it open with her shoulder. It swung inward on silent hinges, and the air inside hit her like a wall, thick with the smell of ozone and dust, the peculiar smell of old buildings that had been sealed up too long. Her flashlight beam swept across the living room. Furniture in the shapes of furniture. Paintings on walls. Nothing out of place. Everything out of place. The kitchen was at the end of the hallway. Laura's footsteps echoed on linoleum. She could hear a rhythmic sound before she even rounded the corner. The sound of a knife hitting a cutting board over and over, in perfect mechanical repetition. Thwack, thwack, thwack. A woman stood at the counter. She was dressed in a terry cloth robe that hadn't been washed in days. Her hair was in a bun, Her hands moved with the precision of a factory machine. She was slicing a tomato. Her fingers lifted the knife, positioned it above the tomato, brought it down. Slice. The piece of tomato fell onto a white ceramic plate. Her hands reset to the starting position. Slice. Mrs. Vance? Laura stepped into the kitchen. Ma'am, put the knife down. The woman didn't stop. Slice. Reset. Slice. Laura reached out to touch the woman's shoulder. The moment her hand made contact with the terry cloth robe, something happened. The air rippled like water. A sound like vroom filled the kitchen. The woman vanished and reappeared 3 feet backward, her hands resetting, her knife lifting. Slice. The stove clock read 02:44. Then it blinked to 02:45, then back to 02:44. On the dining table, Laura saw it. A small, dark object. A music box made of blackened silver, covered in carvings of weeping eyes. The lid was closed, but she could hear the melody coming from inside it. That same tinkling tune that had ended Toby's call. Faint, but insistent. A high-pitched, haunting lullaby. The box emitted a faint pulsing violet light. Laura moved toward it. She didn't know why she did. Some part of her, some deep, animal part, was screaming at her to leave the house, get back in her SUV, drive away, and never come back. But her hand was already reaching out. Her fingers closed around the cold silver of the music box. A hand gripped her wrist from behind. The pressure was immense, crushing. She heard the sound of her own bones cracking before she felt the pain. A hand clad in a heavy charcoal gray coat sleeve. A figure she hadn't heard approach. A figure that had no reflection in the window. The figure hurled her across the room. Laura crashed into a glass coffee table with enough force to shatter it into 1,000 crystalline shards. Her back took the impact. Her lungs seized. For a moment, one terrible moment, she couldn't breathe. She lay on her back in the debris, gasping, her hands bleeding from a dozen glass cuts. Above her, a shadow figure moved. It was tall. Too tall. Its proportions didn't match anything human, but it moved with human purpose. A face obscured by darkness. Laura's hand found her maglite. She raised it and swung upward with all the strength she had left. The flashlight connected with something hard. The figure jerked sideways. She heard a sound like a hollow clack. A knee hitting tile wrong. She didn't wait to see if it would fall. She rolled to her right, crawling across the floor, her hands pushing through shards of glass. The music box had slid across the hardwood. She scooped it up, feeling the metal vibrate against her palm. The melody intensified. The violet light pulsed brighter. Laura ran for the door. She burst through the front entrance into the rain. Behind her, the figure reached the threshold and stopped. It couldn't cross the line between inside and outside. It stood at the door frame, perfectly still, unable to pass. Laura turned to see it more clearly, but the darkness was too complete. The front door swung shut by itself with enough force to shake the entire house. Laura ran to her SUV. She didn't look back. The drive to the Historical Society took 15 minutes. The rain was coming down harder now, a deluge that made the windshield wipers useless. The music box sat on the passenger seat, still vibrating, still singing its impossible melody. Laura's hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold the wheel. The Historical Society basement was accessed through a back entrance that only locals knew about. Laura had been here twice before, tracking down property records for police reports. Elias Thorne was the sole custodian of the archive, a man so old he seemed to be made of paper and dust rather than flesh and blood. She found him in the basement at 4 a.m., sitting exactly where he always sat. at a desk surrounded by stacks of yellowed newspapers, each one carefully annotated with handwritten notes in margins. He was in his 80s now, or perhaps his 90s. It was difficult to tell. His skin had the translucence of old parchment. His wire glasses were held together with tape. "Mr. Thorne, I need your help," Laura said, placing the music box on his desk. Elias didn't look up immediately. He was reading something, his finger moving across the page with agonizing slowness. But the moment his eyes landed on the box, he went absolutely still. His hands began to tremble. He reached for it with a trembling finger, not touching it, but examining it at a distance, as though it might burn him. "This," he whispered. "This shouldn't exist. Not after the fires in '74. Laura leaned over the desk. "What was Project Lethe?" "There's an inscription on the bottom. Project Lethe." Elias pulled out a leather-bound ledger that was so heavy it required both hands. His nails scratched the vellum pages as he flipped through them frantically. Decades of documents, photographs, blueprints. Finally, he stopped at a page that showed a blueprint of a house. The Vance house. They weren't just living there, Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. They were the battery. Trauma is the fuel, Laura. The box creates a loop to harvest the energy of the moment the pain hits. Decade after decade. The suffering is infinite. The box feeds on it. Laura reached for the ledger. She was looking for anything that could explain what she'd seen. And then she found it. A photograph clipped to the page. Black and white. Dated June 1972. A group of children standing in front of a building she didn't recognize. They were wearing clothes from the 1970s. And one of them, a boy on the left side of the photograph, with a distinctive birthmark on his neck, was her father. The ledger slipped from her hands. "That's Thomas Miller," Elias said quietly. "He was the lead researcher. He and his team built the boxes, built the loops. When the government found out what they were doing, there was a fire, an accident. The facility burned. We all thought the boxes had burned too, but there must have been one left, one that survived." A thud echoed from the floor above. Heavy, deliberate. Elias gripped Laura's arm. His hand was surprisingly strong. "They've followed you. The ones who remember. Run." The footsteps grew louder. Multiple people, moving in a formation. Laura grabbed the music box and the ledger, and she ran for the rear exit. Behind her, she heard the crash of the basement door being kicked open. A flashbang grenade rolled across the floor, hissing white smoke. The world exploded in white light. Laura dived behind a heavy steel filing cabinet, just as her hearing evaporated into a high-pitched ringing. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Men moving with military precision. A man in a black mask lunged through the smoke. He was swinging a telescopic baton with practiced efficiency. Laura raised the music box defensively. The silver casing sparked against the steel baton in a shower of white sparks. She kicked his knee. She drove her shoulder into his chest, pinning him against a shelf. Filing folders cascaded down on them like snow. The man grunted under the impact, but he recovered quickly. He grabbed her throat. Laura ripped the mask off his face. Deputy Henderson. 5 years of patrol shifts together. 5 years of holiday parties and coffee runs and late-night drive-arounds on quiet nights. His eyes had a glazed quality, and there was a rhythmic tick in his left eye. "Henderson, what the hell is this?" He didn't respond. His lips moved, and he spoke in a monotone, reciting a string of numbers. 742-951, 742-951, 742-951. His eyes rolled back in his head. He lunged again with a knife that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Laura swung the heavy ledger like a club, hitting him square in the temple. He crumpled. The second man never got a chance to engage. Laura had already grabbed his baton and used it to smash the nearest window. She climbed through, fell into the alley behind the Historical Society, and ran. The cemetery was 3 blocks away. At 5 a.m., Laura pushed through rusted iron gates. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still dark, that particular darkness that comes just before dawn, when the world feels suspended between night and day. The music box was vibrating more violently now. The melody had accelerated, becoming something frantic and distorted. She found her father's headstone in the Miller family plot. Thomas Miller. There were no dates. The stone was weathered, but not weathered enough. It looked recent. A fake grave. A marker for someone the town had decided was dead. There was a keyhole hidden behind a decorative granite ivy leaf. Laura took the music box and felt for the winding key. It turned smoothly in the headstone keyhole. Something mechanical happened underground. The sound of gears. The headstone slid backward, revealing a concrete staircase descending into darkness. LED lights flickered on one by one, illuminating a path downward. The air from below smelled like machine oil and human sweat. Laura descended. The staircase went down for a long time, longer than the depth of the earth should have allowed. The walls were reinforced concrete, painted institutional gray. Cables ran along the ceiling, bundled together and labeled with alphanumeric codes. At the bottom was a door, a heavy security door. It opened automatically when she approached, as though it had been expecting her. The control room was vast. It stretched further than the human eye could comfortably follow. The walls were covered with server racks, floor to ceiling, humming with the sound of high-end cooling fans. A wall of 50 monitors displayed live feeds of every house in Oak Creek, every single one. And in every single one, a resident was frozen in a 5-second loop. The Vance house was on the center screen. Toby's mother, slicing the tomato, slice, reset, slice. It's everyone, Laura whispered. The whole town. She approached the nearest terminal. It was labeled Recovery Station. The screen showed a file. Her file, Laura Miller, birth date, social security number. And underneath, inserted memories, confirmed stable. She touched the screen with a trembling finger. A video started playing. It showed a man sitting in this very room. He was older than she'd ever seen him, 20 years older than he should be, staring directly into the camera with dead eyes. There was a timestamp at the bottom. 2 days ago. Laura, if you're seeing this, you found the box. His voice was broken, fractured. I'm sorry. The town can't handle the truth of what we did. The rhythm keeps them sane. The loops, they keep everyone sane. If you stop it, they'll wake up to 50 years of grief all at once. Their minds will break. They'll die. All of them. That's why I stayed. That's why I've been maintaining the system. It's mercy. Cruel mercy, but mercy nonetheless. The video cut to black. Hello, Laura. She spun around. Thomas Miller stood in the shadows. He looked exactly like the video, aged and cold, his face a mask of military duty. He was holding a tranquilizer rifle with the ease of someone who'd held weapons for most of his life. Give me the box, he said. You're breaking the circuit. People will wake up to the pain of everything they've lost. Laura screamed. She hurled the music box at his head. He ducked, and she lunged at him, tackling him into the server bank. Sparks erupted everywhere, orange and blue lightning filling the air. His rifle fell from his grip and clattered across the floor. They struggled on the ground. Thomas was stronger, but Laura had nothing to lose. She fought like someone drowning. Her hands found a loose power cable. She pressed the live end against his shoulder. The electrical pop was deafening. Thomas jerked and fell back, gasping. She grabbed the tranquilizer rifle. She swung it like a club, hitting him in the ribs with a sound like cracking wood. Once, twice, 3 times. He tried to stand. She hit him again. Thomas collapsed against the server bank, gasping for air. Blood dripped down his chin. "If you stop it," he said, each word coming out like shattered glass, "they'll all wake up. 50 years of pain hitting them all at once. Do you understand? Their minds will fragment. They'll die. They'll all die." Laura looked at the main screen. The Vance family feed was turning red. The family was screaming now, their faces distorted with real emotion. Real pain. Not the mechanical repetition of the loop anymore. Something was breaking. Something was giving way. There was a lever on the console. It was encased in glass. It was labeled "Shut Down." Laura walked toward it. She could still hear Thomas breathing behind her. She could see every family in the town on the monitors, still trapped in their 5-second cycles. The music box was lying on the floor, vibrating so hard the silver was starting to crack. It was glowing white-hot. The melody had become a roar. She smashed the glass lever case with her palm. The glass shattered. She gripped the red lever. She pulled it down. A massive shock wave of blue light erupted from the music box. It spread through the servers, through the monitors, through the underground facility like a wave of coherence. Every circuit lit up at once. Every screen flashed white. The roar intensified. Laura covered her ears and squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them again, Thomas was gone. The facility was shaking. Cracks appeared in the concrete walls. Dust fell from the ceiling like snow. The servers were exploding, one by one, in cascades of sparks. The smell of burning electronics filled the air. Laura ran for the stairs. She climbed. Her legs were screaming. The shaking intensified. Behind her, she heard the sound of the facility collapsing, metal twisted and stressed, the sound of tons of weight shifting through space. She burst through the cemetery opening just as a plume of fire erupted from below. The headstone exploded into pebbles. Blue smoke rushed upward. Laura fell onto the grass, gasping, covered in ash. Dawn was breaking across the horizon. In the town square 3 blocks away, a man who had been sweeping the same spot of concrete for 7 years stopped moving. The broom fell from his hands. His face contorted. He began to weep, real gulping sobs of a man who had just remembered losing everything. Throughout Oak Creek, the loop stopped. Dozens of people dropped to their knees, their eyes focused on the real world for the first time in years or decades. Some of them didn't recognize their own houses. Some of them looked for people who were no longer alive. Some of them simply lay down on the ground and couldn't find the strength to stand. The siren started wailing at 6:20 a.m. By 7 a.m., Laura was sitting on the porch of the Vance house. The rain had stopped. The sky was clear. The house was no longer shimmering or phasing in and out of existence. It was just a house. Toby sat next to her, his shoulders wrapped in a blanket provided by one of the first responders. He was holding a normal sandwich. His mother had made it just moments ago, a real action, not a loop. He was staring at the sunrise without eating it. "It hurts," he said quietly. "Everything hurts." Laura didn't respond. What was there to say? The town was waking up to decades of accumulated trauma. Some people would probably die from the shock. That's what Thomas had said. Their minds couldn't take it. But at least they would be awake. She reached into her pocket. Her fingers found something cold. Silver. A gear from the destroyed music box. It must have become lodged in her jacket during the explosion. She pulled it out and examined it in the morning light. The gear shouldn't have been able to spin. Nothing was attached to it. But as she held it in the palm of her hand, it began to rotate. Slowly at first, then faster, and she could hear it, faint but present. The music box melody, tinkling from the gear itself. Laura's fingers trembled. She looked at her reflection in the window of the Vance house. There was a figure standing right behind her. She saw him in the glass. Thomas, standing perfectly still, his hand holding the music box. She turned around. There was no one there. When she looked back at the reflection, Thomas was still there. He smiled. The music box in his hands was whole and intact, playing that impossible melody. Laura closed her hand over the spinning gear. In her palm, she felt it vibrate. She felt the rhythm of it, the pattern, the cycle. She looked at Toby, who was staring out at the sunrise, unaware that anything had changed. He was in a new loop now. They all were. A slower one, a more merciful one, but a loop nonetheless. She opened her mouth. 911, she whispered to no one at all. What is your emergency? Her eyes flashed with violet light, the same color as the music box, the same color as the grief of an entire town. The porch was suddenly very quiet. The music box melody played on, audible only to those who carried it inside them now. Laura sat in stillness, the spinning gear in her closed fist, and she watched the sunrise over Oak Creek. The town that would never truly wake up. The town that would sleep forever, now, in a rhythm so deep and so vast that no one would ever know the difference between the loop and the waking world. She could feel the gear turning, turning, turning. There was a shape in her peripheral vision. Not quite there, not quite gone, standing at the edge of the driveway. It didn't have a face, but she could feel it watching. She turned to look directly at it. In that moment, the shape turned as well. They faced each other. Laura could hear her own heartbeat. 1, 2, 3, synchronized with the music box melody. The shape took a step forward. Toby was still staring at the sunrise. He never looked around. The figure took another step. Laura's hand tightened on the gear. One more step. She felt the moment when it crossed the threshold of her perception, when it stopped being something she could almost ignore and became something absolutely present, absolutely real. The figure reached out. Laura didn't pull away. She felt the touch, cold, inevitable, like the closing of a door that had always been intended to shut. The world shifted. The sun was still rising. The sky was still clear. The porch was still there. But something in the architecture of reality had changed. Something had clicked into place. Laura looked down at her own hands. The gear was still spinning, and now she could see the pattern, the cycle, the rhythm that governed everything, the pattern that had always been there, that would always be there. She opened her hand and let the gear fall. It didn't make a sound when it hit the porch. It simply landed and stopped spinning. Then she reached into her other pocket. Her fingers found another gear, and another, and another. Every pocket was full of them. She pulled them out slowly, one by one, a handful of silver gears that shouldn't have been there, that had always been there, that she had always been carrying. I remember, she said to no one at all. And as she said it, the gears began to move, not on the porch, in her mind, in her memories, in the circuits of her brain. The gears began to turn, and the music box melody played, and she saw the loops within loops. The town within the town. The cycle within the cycle. She had been in Oak Creek for 17 years. Or had she? She remembered getting the job. She remembered her first night at the dispatch center. She remembered Toby's call. She remembered this moment. She had remembered this moment before. How many times? The sun continued to rise, indifferent to the question. Toby finished his sandwich. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at Laura. "Are you okay?" he asked. Laura smiled. "Yes," she said. "Everything is exactly as it should be." She stood up from the porch. She walked to her SUV, each step feeling both new and ancient at the same time. She got into the driver's seat. She turned on the engine. She looked at the clock on the dashboard. 2:14 a.m. Impossible. It was 7 a.m. a moment ago. She checked her phone. The time was different on the phone. 7:47 a.m. The clock on the SUV was wrong. She turned the radio on. A song was playing. She turned it off. She drove back to the dispatch center. The rain was falling when she got there. She had no memory of leaving work. She was sure she had gone home. She was sure she had slept. But here she was, walking up to the dispatch center in the rain, and the clock in the parking lot read 2:08 a.m. Laura entered the building. Her supervisor looked up from his desk. "You're early," he said. "Shift doesn't start for 5 minutes." Laura walked to her station. She sat down. The 3 monitors glowed in the darkness. The coffee cup was there, warm and waiting. The rain continued to fall outside. She placed her hands on the console. 2:14 a.m. A red light flashed. An incoming 911 call. Laura's finger moved toward the accept button. In her hand, she could feel the gears turning. In her mind, she could hear the music box melody. She knew what call was coming. She had known it before. She would know it again. She hit accept. 911 emergency, she said, her voice calm and professional. "What is your location?" Static, then breathing, then a boy's terrified whisper. "It's happening again. The hallway, it's longer. My mom is making the same sandwich for the 10th time. Help me." Laura picked up her pen. 442 Willow Lane. She had written this address before. She would write it again. The gears turned. The rhythm held. The melody played. The town of Oak Creek slept on, in its merciful, endless cycle. And Laura Miller answered calls at the dispatch center night after night, loop after loop, waiting for the moment when she would finally remember that she had been waiting for this moment all along. The music box never stopped playing. It only changed keys.